Dear students, welcome to my online class. I hope you are fine by the grace of Almighty. And due to COVID-19 crisis, we are taking online classes for you. And today we are going to discuss a very important topic for the students of BA Honors third year and from the course Literary Criticism. Our today's topic is Poetics by Aristotle. So, Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and he worked on all branches of knowledge at that time. He worked on science, he worked on philosophy, and he also worked on literature. And he wrote a book that is in Greek language, that is Poetics. And this book is considered is one of the best literary criticism of all time. And before Elizabethan age, this especially because before William Shakespeare, this book was very appreciated and followed by the dramatist authors of the whole world. This is one sort of classic book. This is one sort of Bible for the authors, for the writers. Okay, but when in Elizabethan age, uh, William Shakespeare introduced his new ideologies, new philosophies on drama, especially on tragedy, and he, for the first time, broke many literary ideas, literary philosophies of Aristotle. And somehow, at present, we can feel that uh, Shakespeare is more successful than Aristotle in terms of, especially in terms of drama and the concept of tragedy and comedy. But we can't deny the importance of Aristotle and his literary criticism. Okay, so Poetics is basically about some ideas and some thoughts of Aristotle regarding different types of poetry. Okay, so according to Aristotle, and this book was written in 335 BC, so it's a very ancient book and one of the most celebrated and appreciated books of all time, Poetics. Okay, and in Poetics, according to Aristotle, epic, tragedy, uh, songs, poems, everything, everything was included to poetry. That means poetry means epic, tragedy, comedy, songs, poems, everything. Okay, so when we will say the word poetry, try to remember this poetry means epic, tragedy, and other things also. Okay, and at the time there was no practice of writing novel or prose. That's why Aristotle didn't write anything about prose writing here. Okay, so poetics is all about poetry, and uh, here we will find his personal conception about epic, the features of tragedy, and the six uh, six part of a successful tragedy, some conception of poetry, his conception of catharsis, his conception of imitation, and obviously his conception about comedy. But in this book, actually, we will find the broad discussion on tragedy. Okay, we won't find enough discussion on comedy or catharsis or epic. Okay, so this book is actually dedicated to tragedy, the features of tragedy, the qualities to be a perfect tragedy. Okay, and at the time of Aristotle, tragedy was highly celebrated by the audience and by the uh, authors. Okay, so let's start. What are the topics? What are the main points? And that will be important for your exam. And we will discuss in a point basis. Okay, we won't discuss all the all the items, all the topics from Poetics. We will discuss the important topics only, because this will be helpful for your exam and for a clear conception about the literary theory of Astral. Okay, so let's start. So, the very beginning of this book, that is literary book, we find some differences between epic and tragedy by Astral. Okay, so both of them are poetry. Epic is also poetry, and tragedy is also one sort of poetry. Okay, but there are some differences, and Aristotle has discussed these differences in all over the book, and sometimes they are scattered, and we have announced here in a single slide for you, and this will be easy for you to remember. First, what are the difference between epic and tragedy, and sometimes you face a question about the differences of epic and tragedy. Okay, and we know what is epic and we know what is tragedy. Let's see the differences according to Aristotle, and don't forget these differences are according to only Aristotle, not by the modern critics or not by the modern uh, writers or authors. Okay, and you know, in modern age we don't practice or we don't read, and we the authors don't write epic, but tragedy is very common. So epic is a very popular form of uh, poetry in ancient time, but in modern age we don't practice epic, but we practice tragedy. But this tragedy is somehow different than the tragedies of uh, Aristotle. Okay, we will discuss the differences between modern tragedy and ancient tragedy, that means Greek tragedy, in the later portion of this discussion. Okay, so look at the differences. Nobleman, in terms of epic, nobleman with noble action. That means in epic there should be some nobleman with noble action. মানে that means এখানে কোনো একটা ইম্পর্টেন্ট বিষয় নিয়ে ইম্পর্টেন্ট ঘটনা নিয়ে কি হবে কাজটা, মানে গল্পটার অ্যাকশনটা বা প্লটটা দাঁড়ানো হবে, এবং এখানকার ক্যারেক্টারগুলো কি হবে ইম্পর্টেন্ট. They don't deal with the common man, common incidents. Okay, that in case of tragedy the thing is same, nobleman with noble action. এখানেও কি হচ্ছে, বড় বড় মানুষ গুরুত্বপূর্ণ কাজ করবে, not the common actions, not by the common people. Okay, next example, next difference. One in terms of epic, one specific meter, usually hexameter or heroic measure. That means in terms of epic, the epic writers of the time used hexameter. Okay, but in terms of tragedy there can be several meter in different stages of action. We will discuss this language treatment in later, and there should be several types of meters in several situations or several stages. Okay, but in epic there should be one specific meter, that is hexameter. And epic, in terms of epic, it is narrative in nature. So epic should be always narrative. That means একজন রাইটার একটা গল্প ন্যারেট করবে. That means এখানে is totally narrative based. But in terms of tragedy it is action and dialogue based. It's not narrative, it's action and dialogue based. Okay, and in terms of epic it can be simple, complex, ethical, pathetic, and the same thing is for tragedy, that is it can be simple, complex, ethical, pathetic. And in epic there should be no use of songs. Okay, but in tragedy we find frequent use of songs. This thing is very common for the ancient writer and Greek writers, and for the modern writers, especially the writers of the writer like William Shakespeare. He also used songs in his tragedies. Okay, and these songs can be called chorus sometimes. And epic is not for a single setting, because it's a vast thing, it's a huge the numerous number of lines, the volume is huge. That's why we can't read or we can't listen to epic in a single sitting. Okay, so that means it takes many days to read or to listen to and complete epic. But tragedy should be done in a single sitting. That means it should not be huge in size like epic. এটা এপিকের চেয়ে সাইজে ছোট হবে, দ্যাটস দ্য মেইন পয়েন্ট। এবং চাইলে সিঙ্গেল সিটিং এ পড়া যাবে অথবা দেখা যাবে। ক্লিয়ার? অ্যান্ড এপিক ক্যান বি ডান অন স্টেজ অন ওরাল রিডিং। এপিক পড়াও যেতে পারে এবং স্টেজে অভিনয় করা যেতে পারে। দ্য সেম থিং happens in case of tragedy. It can be staged on stage and it can be for reading. Okay. And epic deals with serious topic, and tragedy also deals with serious topic. That means uh, they don't deal with silly factors, silly topics, or silly incidents. Okay, they always deal with serious topics. Okay, so these are the basic concepts of epic and tragedy by Aristotle. Okay, let's see the next point. And our next point, the main target of Aristotle in Poetics, that is tragedy. And in book 6 or chapter 6, he has discussed the features and criteria of tragedy and its components and its parts, basic or essential parts. Okay, so in the whole book Poetics, we find two different definition of tragedy. First one is, look at the example, and if you look at the definition, if you look at the definition, if you try to understand the definitions perfectly, then your conception of tragedy will be somehow clear. So to understanding definitions of tragedy will be very important for you to answer any question on tragedy, because it is quite sure you face a question on tragedy. Okay, and their features and their 6 components or 6 criteria. So look at the first definition, first information about tragedy, and this is a quotation from uh, Poetics. And don't forget that we will read the translation of Poetics. We don't know how to read or how to write Greek language. That's why we have to deal with the English translation. That means uh, you have a book, obviously you have a book, and this book should be a translation. That means a classic in translation in English. Okay, so our this type of definition uh, will not be same for all translations. Okay, so in one translation you can get this type of definition, but in another translation you can have some different types of words and different types of explanation. Okay, but the whole message or the whole knowledge will be same.